I am a self-professed hophead. I love a nice citrusy, piney, bitter flavor profile. I will probably make some IPA-centered videos this winter or spring, but in the meantime, I can't pass up talking about Hoplark and their hop teas. I discovered them this winter when I did the keto diet. I craved those iconic flavors, but obviously beer was off the table. When I did my farmer's market booth in the summer of 2020, I had brewed some hop teas and carbonated them myself using a DrinkMate carbonator, but I had run out of the local hops I'd picked by the time I started the diet. And it was winter, so hops aren't in season, and like nothing is in season in Wyoming and northern Colorado. It was at this point that I discovered Hoplark on Instagram and decided to try their hop teas. Needless to say, they were a great stand-in for that flavor, and I became a serious fan. When I discovered that they also got their start as a farmer's market booth, I was excited to see my parallel with them, and I respected their ability to upscale to where they're at now. So fast forward to this summer, when I moved to Colorado, and I was delighted to find Hoplark's hop teas readily available in my local grocery stores. I want to make it clear that their teas aren't just a stand-in for IPAs though. Since they don't have alcohol, I maintain that you can enjoy them in both settings where you would want a beer, but also when you just want something clean and refreshing to sip. Their caffeinated options are a great switch up from coffee every once in a while, and their non-caffeinated options can be enjoyed literally whenever. Whether you're looking for an IPA alternative that won't mess you up, or you just need something that's simultaneously interesting to your taste buds and hydrating. I have a flight prepared for us today that covers their flagship teas and a few of their more limited releases. I'm not going to be comparing to any of their hop waters at the moment, because one, I don't have any of them on hand, and two, they're distinctly different recipes. The hop teas have hops, tea, water, and the hop waters have hops and water. So I figured I'd just compare the teas today and save the hop waters for a future video sometime. They did a limited hop water this month that I'm pretty interested in trying that is brewed in collaboration with Outer Range Brewing. Anyways, let's dive into those teas. So right away, because these don't have any carbs in them, I'm going to assume that the mouthfeel is not going to vary much, if at all, between them. I've had all of these before with the exception of the white tea one, and I haven't noticed a difference in mouthfeel independently sipping them. So we'll see how it turns out, but I am probably not going to include a mouthfeel segment. They also all have citric acid added, I assume, to help preserve the tea and keep it from getting funky or off in the can. So there's that to consider. But if anything, that will just contribute a mild citrusiness that I think will be dwarfed by the citrusiness provided by the hops, so I'm not terribly worried about that. I think it was a good call to add citric acid to the can, keep it tasting good for a longer amount of time on a shelf. So to kick things off, let's go with the green one, which is the very first hop tea I purchased. The big thing I remember from this one is that it's herbaceous, and the green tea note is still there, but it's got that level of hoppiness that is still satisfying to somebody who hasn't had an IPA in a few months. So it's a green tea with mosaic hops. The aroma is floral, citrusy, berry forward, and maybe a little bit of lemongrass. The palate has a lot of blueberry and jasmine and a little bit of lemongrass. And the finish has a mild cherry and florality, which kind of combines into a bubblegummy flavor and maybe a little bit of grassiness. It is everything that I remember, and I love it. It's a good one. I think it would pair extremely well with some sushi. Up next is the only one I haven't had in this whole lineup, so I'm pretty excited to get in and try it. I know it's one of the one of the staples, so I don't know why I haven't had it yet, but for the purposes of this video, I figured I have to go get some. So let's hop in. The aroma is just full on stone fruit and rose hips and like a lemony citrus, and I'm kind of in love. That lemon citrus follows straight into the palate, but then it kind of unfolds into a white peach and some tropical flavors. The finish has just a mild hop bitterness, but it's more sweet than anything else, and just a coalescence of fruit. And I'm kind of in love. This might be my favorite up here. Having had all of these in the past, I love them, but this is doing it for me, and I'm excited. I'm a fan now. So then third we have the Citra Bomb, which is a white tea with Citra hops. So I mean, color-wise, I would assume they use less tea and more hops. The aroma is very grassy and has a grapefruit citrus quality, classic Citra notes. There's a reason it's one of the most popular hop varietals. The palate is limey and has a lot of grapefruit bitterness. And then the finish is floral and just a touch piney.
Just a touch of olive oil.
They're very, very green flavors. So again, I mean, so the can art's on point. This one also has less caffeine than all of the other caffeinated options up here, which I really appreciate. It's a good afternoon hop tea, whereas some of these other ones, I'm like, some of the caffeine levels I would have at like lunch and afternoon, but just knowing my caffeine tolerance, I should avoid them past 3 p.m. Otherwise, I'm gonna stay up all night. And here we've got the Calm One, chamomile tea with Citra hops. The aroma's got a lot of chamomile herbiness and earthiness, and maybe some mild citrus with a little bit of like lemon rind bitterness. The palate has some mild Honeycrisp sweetness, some spices, and a mild bitterness lent by the Citra. And then the finish is honey and almost creamy with how smooth it is. It's probably one of the least hoppy options up here. So naturally we put it next to the really hoppy one and the really, really hoppy one. So yeah, I'm about to get punched by some hops, and it's gonna be fun. So moving on to the really hoppy one, we have a black tea brewed with Simcoe and Citra, and it's their flagship tea. It was the one that I believe that was originally featured at their farmers market booth. I relate to that story very much. So let's hop in and see how their flagship is. So the aroma is a classic toasty black tea with some orange citrus and a little bit of pininess. The palate's got this note of like orange cranberry scone, like a little bit of maltiness, a little bit of cranberry bitterness, a little bit of orange sweetness. There's like maltiness and cinnamon. It's pretty fantastic. On the finish, there's honey that pretty quickly gives way to some tannins that kind of dry out your mouth a little bit, but in a pleasant way. My flagship hop tea at my farmer's market booth would have been closer to the Calm One. I kind of wanted to offer it as a caffeine-free option for people, since I also did a lot of coffee as nitro cold brew. I sweetened my tea, and I'm kind of thinking that maybe I shouldn't have, because I like how these both are without any sweeteners, and I kind of regret adding honey to my process, but oh well. I think it would have been interesting to see what the general public in the Wyoming farmers market scene would have responded to if I hadn't added some sweetener, or if I had two options, one that was sweetened and one that was not. But I mean, ultimately, when you're doing a farmer's market, you only have so much space, especially when you're packing it all in your car to do the event. So part of why I ordered them this way is to separate out the like weirder and more limited ones from the more flagship ones. But I also put these two next to each other because I'm really interested to try them back to back. I haven't yet. But if I understand it correctly, the really, really hoppy one is essentially just a double hopped version of the really hoppy one. On the color, it looks a little bit hazier, so maybe there's a little bit of a decision to increase that hoppiness level some more, not filtering it as much to really dial up that hoppy flavor. Let's hop in and see how it is. So the aroma is orange citrus and some grassiness and nuttiness. There's a hop bitterness up front on the palate, and the caramel, black tea, malty sort of notes are a little more reduced. Maybe that's just because they're being overpowered a little bit versus on the really hoppy one. And then it pretty much immediately gives way to a resinous herbaceousness. The finish is very peppery and very lingering. It's not uncommon for very hoppy beverages to give off a pepperiness especially when there's more hop particles in the beverage. I can't explain the science of that, but it is something that I've noticed on some hazier beverages. There's this distinct pepperiness on the finish, and that is definitely here. I bet the black tea, lends a helping hand in making it more peppery, but yeah, I like it. It's a very good, very in-your-face hoppiness. They weren't lying when they called it the really, really hoppy one. Up next is the one I received most recently, the Edel Hopfen one, otherwise known as the Noble Hop one. It is Hoplark's homage to the Oktoberfest beer style. Noble hop varietals are commonly used in Oktoberfest beers. I did do an Oktoberfest beer episode if you're interested in looking at that. Naturally, this isn't going to be a perfect representation of Oktoberfest beer. This is tea, but I think we'll be able to find some similar characteristics. So it is a black tea with Tettnanger and Hallertau Mintelfra hops. You can at me if I butchered that pronunciation. But enough talking, let's dive in. The aroma has a lot of honey and mandarin orange and like bergamot florality. The palate is like the other black teas if you dialed back that hop forwardness and made it more nuanced, and dialed up some of the black tea. Yeah, the hoppiness is more nuanced. The two together kind of have like some florality and delicate spiciness. They play very well together. Lots of orange, mild bitterness. On the finish, there's this mild breadiness and spice, and it's very rich. It does embody common flavor notes between tea and Oktoberfest beer, so props to you. I would say of the Oktoberfests that I tried during my Oktoberfest beer flight, I would say this is closest to the Sierra Nevada, just because of Sierra Nevada's pronounced honey sweetness, because it was an amber Märzen, but it is very good, and I'm very glad that I have a bunch of cans of it in the fridge. So almost at the end here, we have the Sprucey One. The nose is a lot of bitter pine, resinous, sappy, maybe a mild citrusy sweetness, very outdoorsy. It smells like I'm in the woods in a good way. The palate is like a green pine and a slight lemonade, which just sort of rolls into the finish as like a lemongrass. And this one, I will contradict myself and talk about mouthfeel, because the resininess in this does kind of set it apart from the rest of these. It is a little bit more cloying and sticky and maybe a little rounder. It's got a little more oily oomph. I'd love to have a can of this in the woods. I think that would be really fun. You just feel like you're at one with nature, you know? And last but not least, we have the Juniper One. So this one on the nose has more of a like Christmassy pine note, which I don't know how to quantify. There's also some green apple, reflecting as like malic acidity and maybe some like tartness on the nose. The palette has a lot of rich botanicals and multifaceted juniper notes. I would assume that's because they used fresh and not dried berries and needles, and they used both berries and needles. And I think the needles provide a little bit more of that bitterness and resiny sweetness, and the berries probably rounded out the flavor, gave it a little bit more depth, gave it some more complex florality, and the finish is tropical pineapple with some mild bitterness, and it's oilier than the rest of these. This one will make an appearance in my video next Thursday. I'm not gonna say anything else. So there are two teas on the website that I don't have on hand, namely the yerba mate one and the Thai basil one. Let me know in the comments if I should snag some of those before their limited runs sell out so I can review them. I absolutely love what Hoplark is doing in the craft beverage industry. Hopheads need not limit themselves to IPAs anymore. If you're looking for a tasty hoppy brew, but you're either looking to stay sober, lose some weight, or want to enjoy the flavors in more situations, crack open some HopTeas, my friend. Cheers.